Betty Sternberg, currently the director of the Teacher Leader Fellowship Program at Central Connecticut State University. I've been in education now for September is going to be 48 years. I started in San Jose, California in 1972. I've held many positions in Connecticut at our regional education service centers at first, and then at the State Department of Education from the time I was 30 years old. And culminated actually in my becoming Commissioner of Education in 2003. All the time, in whatever positions I ever stayed in, I really saw myself as a teacher, whether I was teaching in a classroom or teaching in front of the legislature. Same kinds of things you do for adults as you do for children. At any rate, I want to tell you that I'm honored and excited to have been asked to speak to you in this upcoming school year. You know, of course, as commissioner, I always gave back to school talks. And boy, this back to school talk is certainly like no other one because we're talking about no other circumstance that I ever experienced in my lifetime. I want to focus on three different areas for you as you think about going back to school and exercising your leadership in both within your classroom, with your colleagues, within your school, within your district, because each and every one of you is a true leader. You're a teacher leader. So here are the three areas that I want to talk about. First one is best illustrated by a poem that was written by Al Zolinas, I think. It's called Love in the Classroom for My Students. Afternoon, across the garden in Green Hall, someone begins playing the old piano, a spontaneous piece, amateurish and alive, full of simple, joyful melody. The music flows among us in the classroom. I stand in front of my students telling them about sentence fragments, and I ask them to find the 10 fragments in the 21-sentence paragraph on page 45. They bend over their books and begin. Hamid's lips move as he follows the tortuous labyrinth of English syntax. And he describes other students. And then he says, the melody floats around and through us in the room, broken here and there, fragmented, restarted. It feels mid-Eastern, but it could be jazz or the blues, or it could be anything from anywhere. I sit down on my desk to wait, and it hits me from nowhere. A sudden, sweet, almost painful love for my students. Never mind, I want to cry out. It doesn't matter about fragments, finding them or not. Everything's a fragment and everything's not a fragment. Listen to the music, how fragmented, how whole, how we can't separate the music from the sun falling on its knees, on all the greenness. From the moment, how the moment contains all the fragments of yesterday and everything we'll ever know of tomorrow. Instead, I keep a coward's silence. The music stops abruptly, they finish their work, and we go through the right answers, which is to say, we separate the fragments from the whole. Well, my first point to you is step back and ask yourself how many times you've been teaching fragments which have been separated from the whole, and we never step back, either as teachers or for our kids, and say, what's the whole? What are we teaching? Why are we teaching this? Why are you learning this? What are we really doing? And my first point to you is, after what we've gone through, and it's almost sad that the pandemic is going to be the stimulus to cause us to do this, but we have got to step back as a profession, and you are the ones, teachers, who have to be intimately involved in this and say, why am I teaching this? Is this really important? Is this really essential? What is it that's essential that kids have to know and be able to do? And how do we convey that? And how do kids know that this is essential and why they are doing it? If you can honestly say to yourself that this is essential and important, keep it in what you're doing. If it isn't, throw it out. And by the way, When I used to say this, people would say to me, oh, but you're testing. And what if it's on the test? Well, guess what? We have another amazing opportunity now. The tests are being thrown to the side finally. There's a lot of questioning about whether we really should be doing this much testing and what value it has to tell us about our kids. And if you have Harvard that just said they're not going to be asking for the SAT for admissions, you can see very quickly that the dominoes are going to fall all over. And so that moves me to the second point, the point about teaching social and emotional competence. For quite a while, we didn't actively and directly do that. They were considered soft skills. I don't know a teacher who hasn't said and hasn't been concerned about how they are supporting their students and their families emotionally. There are some things that cannot be measured on the CMT, CAPT, SAT, AP, and NAEP. Respect for others and their opinions, taking risks necessary to fulfill aspirations, perseverance in the face of challenges, compassion for others. They can only be taught by example. They cannot be measured on a test. The only way to determine whether someone has developed these characteristics is through the test of life. Sadly, our young people see too many negative examples in too many walks of life, but there are models for integrity, kindness, compassion, and caring. They're called teachers and principals, bus drivers, guidance counselors, custodians, parents, coaches, cafeteria workers, board members, and yes, superintendents and commissioners. So I said that 15 years ago. It's still important and true now. And now, with COVID, I think that our nation really has come to understand, and certainly the folks in the state of Connecticut, after being put in the situation of teaching their children at home, they understand that you are committed, kind, and caring folks, and they appreciate it in a way they really hadn't heretofore. So this presents a great opportunity for our profession and for you. I want to talk about the unique passions and interests of kids. The hook that we need to get, one of the ways to support kids emotionally, is to support them in their pursuit of what's important to them. And I'm going to give a little story. I don't want it to sound negative, but this is a story that's close to me. My granddaughter, who's a kindergartner and not in this state, I'll say that quickly, goes to a school where there's a lot of project-based learning that takes place, and that's great. It's really wonderful. Her teacher very wonderfully checked in with every kindergarten student every week, and she was the project for the kindergarten was about gardening, and Susanna liked it. It wasn't that she wasn't interested in it. But she, at the same time that she was doing that project, read a book about famous women. And she was really into the book, and particularly into one of the women in the book, whose name was Josephine Baker. And honestly, I didn't know about Josephine Baker. She was a very famous jazz dancer, a black woman. In the 1920s, she moved from the U.S. to Paris and became internationally known for her dancing. And Susanna was just taken with this woman, and she wanted to do a project. And so at home, she did a project, and she put together a project board just like she'd done for other projects in school. And she was just so excited and proud of herself about putting together that board and doing all this research on her own. And when the next week came up, she excitedly got on the phone call with her teacher to tell her and show her the project board and tell her about this person. And might have been a long, hard week for this teacher, but the teacher said, "Oh, that's nice, Susanna. Now tell me, what were you doing on the gardening project?" Well, you know, it probably is hard also over the internet to pick up on this, but Susanna was so elated about this project and so waiting to tell her teacher. But her interest and her passion wasn't honored by that question. And imagine where Susanna could have gone if her teacher had said, Susanna, did you get to see any of the dances that Josephine Baker did? How did you find them, or how could you find them, do you think? What about the clothes Josephine Baker wore? What did they look like, and how do dancers today look? How do they compare to dancers today? They're all sorts of exciting questions that Susanna could have been led toward to even do more work on it, and she would have because she had great interest. Instead, what happened is she sort of dejectedly put away the project board, and when we were encouraging her to talk to her other grandparents about it, she said, no, that's okay. So sadly, that great interest was squelched. The unique talents and needs of kids, no matter what, just has to be connected to. You know, I wrote, the last thing I wrote in that back to school address 15 years ago was, I said, only by connecting with the heart and soul of each child as an individual will we truly leave no child behind. That's the way I ended the back to school address. And this is true, it's true today. We've got to be good at figuring out how to help develop and extend the passions that kids have. My third point to all of you is I'm going to encourage each of you to be good to yourselves, to be sure that you're sitting with yourself and helping yourself in whatever that may be. You know, I'm giving this talk in my, what I call my garden room, and if I could pan around, you'd see my gorgeous orchids here that are in full bloom, and I love gardening, and I get a lot of peace and solace from flowers, from gardening. You find your own peace and solace and do it in your own way, and make time for you, because otherwise you won't have the energy and commitment that you really need and for everybody else, and you're going to need it for everybody else because you're in a helping profession, and I'm sure you went into it because you're caring and kind and committed. Continue that with each other. Take the time. Don't worry about teaching the quadratic equation. Don't worry about teaching the sentence fragments. Worry about spending time sitting back, giving an ear and understanding and caring to what people have gone through, the kids in your classrooms and your people. And I know this is going to be very difficult because if, let's say, you're not online and you're in class, you're doing that with masks on your face and with masks on kids' faces and with masks on your colleagues' face. And boy, I bet you, just as me, I was thinking through how I would manage this as a teacher, because I always took kids' clues, and one of the clues is to see what their face looks like. And now what you're going to have to do is see it only from their eyes, and of course things they do with their bodies, and it's going to be tough. So take the time. Don't begrudge that time, because talk about supporting each other emotionally. That's the only way that we are all going to get through this. One day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. So again, I think there's great opportunity this year. It's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of commitment. And some of you, I know some of my dear colleagues have said, I'm done. I'm out of here. And I respect that. I respect that they recognize that they will not be able to do that for their kids and their colleagues. Those of you who are staying in it, you're going to need lots of energy. So I hope you're taking a break. I hope you're giving yourself what you need to give yourself to rejuvenate yourselves. And then you jump in and be the leaders more than ever You are leaders. Recognize you are. Conduct yourselves as you are. You're not going to be able to wait for someone telling you to do X, Y, and Z. It's what you collectively together figure out makes sense in the context of our world today. So thank you. Thank you so much for what you've done and for what you're going to be doing.